months and months about the charisma, the proclamation, the good news. We've been just talking all about why this message of the gospel and its salvation is, wow, fantastic news. Now we transition into, once we have accepted and embraced that good news, it places demands on us. It's not just like Mardi Gras beads thrown at you, you know, it has value. And the value, being a disciple has a cost of discipleship. And when we start to talk about where the rubber meets the road, and where the rubber meets the road are things like human sexuality and marriage and family and so forth, it's hard. There's a lot to swallow. That same Pope John Paul II, now St. John Paul II, he has a phenomenal encyclical called Veritatis Splendor, Splendor of the Truth. It's a long encyclical. It's not the easiest thing to read, but he talks in it about something called the gradualness of the law. The gradualness of the law. And he puts to rest, shoots down the idea that there is a gradualness to the law. That, okay, maybe Andy is a strong Christian, so he could follow the law, but there are other people that are weak, and then the same law doesn't apply to them. A lesser law applies to them. And he clearly said, no. The law is the law for everybody. There is no gradualness to the law. But we all come to the law gradually. That's what we saw the dynamic in the room last week, right? You heard the law. And the law is not easy on us when it comes to how we live our life as Catholic Christian, what it means and what it demands of us. It requires us to grow in virtue and grow in holiness. And that does take time. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to each and every one of us, not only in this room, but in this world. Okay? So what you heard last week was the truth about human sexuality and God's plan and purpose for marriage. The whole enchilada, including, of course, the evil of abortion, but also the evil of contraception, the evil of taking human life, which is God's greatest gift. There's no greater gift than human life, and taking it into our own hands and deciding that we will do with it as we please. Now, St. John Paul II famously said, life is a gift from God. Man cannot do with it as he pleases. Which is why the whole gamut, not just abortion, not just contraception, but we're going to have to start talking seriously as a church about in vitro fertilization, because that is becoming so common now. The way we used to talk about natural family planning and contraception, we need to include, this is not God's plan. You don't make babies in test tubes or petri dishes. You know, and in vitro fertilization generally involves abortion, because again, unbeknownst to most people, you fertilize, well, yeah, this comes from the National Institute for Health. This is not even Catholic, right? The National Institute for Health tells us that about 8 to 30 embryos are fertilized. That's 8 to 30 human beings in a petri dish, of which they will select one, implant it in the woman, hoping that it'll take, and the other 7 to 29 are discarded. Thrown away. That's immoral. That's not right. Not only is it not God's plan for how children are to be brought into the world, but it's abortion as well. Contraception, today is potentially abortion. We call it abortifacient. It's potentially abortion. When the birth control, it wasn't called contraception. In arguments, when the birth control was being test marketed by the FDA, it was an estrogen-based birth control. And they test marketed it in Puerto Rico. And women were dropping like flies from strokes and heart attacks. And the FDA said, forget about it. No way are we going to approve this. This is deadly for a huge number of women. Well, the pharmaceutical company said, cha-ching, we're not going to let this go. There's too much money here. So the estrogen base was an inoculant. It prevented a woman from ovulating. And that's why she didn't get pregnant. You don't ovulate, you don't get pregnant. But that anti-ovulant was causing the deaths of so many women. So the pharmaceutical companies came out with a progesterone-based contraception. Every contraceptive today, the patch, whatever it is progesterone-based. And what progesterone does is the woman still ovulates, but it makes the lining of the uterus inhospitable for implantation. You know, the fertilized egg has to attach to the wall of the uterus for nourishment and food and survival. So if a woman and man engage in sexual activity and she gets pregnant and she's on birth control, that baby will be conceived in the womb, but it won't be able to implant. And it'll die of starvation. That's what contraception is today. Now, that's not the spiritual reason for not doing it, but it certainly is an equally good reason for not doing it, because it could be an abortion. So, you know, all of these things we've been talking about, oh, Mary conceived without sin, or God is Trinitarian, and Jesus raised from the dead, all that's wonderful, and we can embrace that and accept that. But now we're getting to the point, as I say, where the rubber meets the road. And we're hearing what this good news demands of us. It puts requirements on us as disciples of Jesus Christ by being obedient to the church he founded. So, after Andy, I'm going to shut up now and let Andy take over, but after Andy finishes today, what I think will be good, maybe, I don't know if we can do it all next week, for like maybe the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to start to look at different levels of church teaching. You know, it's not like all church teaching is one big box and you have to obey everything. There's various levels of teaching. You know, I gave out that sheet with the, what is it, 255 dogmas that you're required to believe. Okay, that's kind of a very, very, very 30,000 foot top level thing. I want to dig in a little more deeper to that. Because there are dogmas, there are doctrines, there's several kinds of doctrines, there's authoritative doctrines and definitive doctrines, and there's prudential admonitions. We want to look at all of that. And once we understand that, the next topic we'll do is the role of conscience, because conscience is bigger than life. Okay, so that's our trajectory. That's where we're going. So anyway, enough daily stuff.
I always like Paul 6 because it's much easier to read and it's a very short.
16 pages, yeah.
Yeah. This is $9, but the Vatican gives it away for free. And I put that link on our RCIA page.
Put the link for custody community as well, because that's what Paul was responding, was supplementing to. This is Pius IX, when we talked last week about the Lambeth Conference, when the crack in the dam, when the Protestant denominations, under extremely limited, narrow circumstances, permitted contraception, boom! You know? So that happened in 1930, and December 31st of 1930, Pope Pius XI issued Custody Connubii in response to the Lambeth Conference dictate about permitted contraception. So that too ties in. And where do we fit into this picture? You know, what does it demand of us as Catholic Christians? So that's where we're going. That's our plan as we move forward. So again, you see, it's been building. You know, so I know we perhaps need to repeat some stuff if we could for those who join us a little bit later. But this we're kind of getting to the crescendo here. What does it mean for me as a Catholic Christian? All these things. So anyway,
Can you spell Casti Connubii?
C-A-S-T-I. Connubii. On human marriage. On human. I'll send you the link.
Then I'll put it on.
C-A-N-U-B-E-I. Casti Connubii.
It popped up all by itself.
And I just wanted to add, just for me personally, I think the Catholic Church's teachings on these things is personally what drew me here more so. Because it's so strong, it's so consistent, it's so clear, and I wish that Protestants would stand up for that
I remember
I mean, it's
visiting.
like, once you hear it and you see it, you're just like, it's so
Absolutely.
obvious.
Resonates with core of your being. I remember visiting in Lake City, I was for a number of years the chaplain for AWA, the Women's Answer Medical Center, the pro-life crisis pregnancy center. And we visited the Lake City Pregnancy Center, and I sat down with their chaplain, who was a Protestant minister, and in our discussion I said, well, you're probably going to agree with me, but what I said, what we just said about contraception, he goes, oh, I think you have absolutely right, but it's hard because it changes fundamentally how a young married couple will live their married life. It
Especially
changes.
with all the IVF stuff, I mean, it's like everybody is, and they're not strong on that at all.
Not at all. And sadly, our new president is pro-life, but he's also pro-IVF, and
Yeah,
he doesn't understand. Most
other
people-
side of the same coin.
Yeah, I've had family members screaming at me when we do it. You know that well. But it makes a baby. It's good. It's the same as abortion or euthanasia. It's taking human life into your own hands and you're deciding. And where will it lead? Designer babies, right? You're going to look at, what characteristics do I want? Let's have an in vitro fertilization and then do a genetic analysis. And this one looks like it's going to be the most likely to be, a Nobel Prize winning scientist or whatever, or genius of some sort, or blonde hair, blue eyes. It's going to lead to the human designer babies. Not good. Not good. So anyway, I've said enough. I'm taking too much baby time. Go ahead, Andy.
Thank you. That's a good sort of introduction or segue to what we're going to be talking about today. And we I think discussed or ended with the Lambeth conference in Lambeth, which is a little community outside of London, where the Church of England had this 1930 conference. I want to read you something that was written in response to that conference, and ask if you can guess who wrote this and where it came from. It says, the committee's report, if carried into effect, would sound the death knell of marriage as a holy institution by establishing degrading practices which would encourage indiscriminate immorality. The suggestion that the use of legalized contraceptives would be, quote, careful and restrained, unquote, and that's a quote from the report, the Lambeth report, is preposterous. Preposterous. This was something written March 22nd, 1931. Who put this out? Would you guess? You don't know guessing? Not even guess the Catholic Church or the Pope or a Cardinal or someone like that? Or a Billy Graham sort of person back in the 30s?
Yeah.
Well, actually, this was an editorial in the Washington Post. And if anyone knows anything about the Washington Post, at least today, you know that it's the official newspaper of the deep state in Washington, D.C. And it's very, very, very liberal. But at the time, they recognized clearly that what the consequences would be from what the Church of England was proposing to sanction. And so it's sort of like Pope Paul VI's warnings in Humanae Vitae that these things would follow from it, and everyone mocked it and made fun of it and said, he doesn't play, he don't play the game, he don't make no rules. You ever hear that said before? I heard it before a lot of times back then.
Little old Italian man in Rome telling us what to do.
Paul VI was Italian before he became quote Pope, and so that's kind of how they were mocking that. What Deacon Henry was talking about, I'm getting into that. My mom always calls you Bishop, so I've fallen into that. What Deacon Henry was saying about these truths, these teachings, is very true. These things are hard. They're hard to follow for us. But another way of looking at it, if Jesus was sitting here in our class, well, first of all, if he was sitting in our class, I wouldn't be sitting here, he'd be teaching. But he would say, have you thought about the fact that these teachings are not hard? How he said his yoke was easy, his burden was light. And he warned in the Sermon on the Mount that whoever changes the least of these commandments and teaches men to do so is the very least in the kingdom of heaven. And so, Jesus certainly believed in rules. We want to believe today that Jesus would just take people as they were and did not impose his value system or judgments on people. That's nothing to be further from the truth. But he was saying, maybe it's your hardness of heart that is a problem, not the hardness of the rules. Archbishop Chaput, who was he was in Philadelphia, I believe, before he retired, he said there are three dimensions to truth. There are three dimensions to Catholic teaching. They're not rules to just frustrate people and make their life miserable and instill as much guilt as possible in people. Truths are important, he said, for three reasons. One is truth is objective. How many times have you heard people say over and over again on programs and this and that, well, that may be your truth, but this is my truth. And that if you really stop and think about that, and if you were to say that that's what we're going to do, we're going to follow that rule, that there are no truths, and your truth may not be my truth, but you can have your truth and act on it and do whatever you want. Can you imagine the type of society that we would have? Why not apply that to all laws, all things, not just moral laws, but all laws, civil laws? 90 miles per hour, officer, maybe your truth is a violation to me, but I'm obeying the law and I'm following the dictates of my heart. And if I ever tried that, I'm pretty sure I'd get a ticket anyhow. You might consider Baker acting as well, but I'd get a ticket. The second thing...
You could fix it. You could fix your own tickets, can't you?
Right. Archbishop also said that the truths are good for helping us to guide our daily lives. I mean, if you didn't have any truths in your life, how would you know when you get up in the morning, you get dressed, you go out the door, and you encounter people in every type of setting you can imagine? How would you really know how to interact with people and how to conduct yourself and how to live among other beings in a joyful, loving, and constructive way? It would be impossible if we didn't have a common frame of reference. And there is a truth that is objective and is common to every one of us. But finally, he said, the most important thing about truth is not that it's restrictive, not that it's punitive, and people who insist on it are killjoys. It's there because it is salvific. It has saving power. When you know the truth and you take it into yourself and you follow it, then it has saving capacity. If you read Psalm 19 about the law, read Psalm 119. I think 119 is one of the longest psalms in the Bible. But it talks about the beauty and the splendor and the lovingness and the guidance and so many things about the law that are so wonderful. There was a time when we thought the law was a very good thing, and Jesus did not say the law is bad, and that's just an Old Testament thing that my mean old dad was going through. And I'm the son that's, I'm with you, I'm hip, baby, we're going to have fun, we're going to take it easy. Law is schma, we don't worry about that. That's not true. That's just not true. And in our culture, and how we basically marinate in relativism, marinate in every type of polluted immorality you can think of, it becomes so easy to be pulled into that state of mind where you begin to doubt that there is any kind of objective truth. You doubt whether it should be imposed on anyone, and you doubt whether you should make any value judgment about anyone. And the person who is snickering and laughing and is Satan and his demons, because he loves that. He loves it. What did Jesus say? He's a father of lies from the very beginning. And that if you follow the truth, at first it'll seem constricting and so forth, but it has really saving power. It has really great saving power. And God would not give us something that was not for our own good.
That's because the truth is a person, it's not an idea.
That's right, that's right. We're not just reciting precepts and rules, because ultimately the truth is Jesus. The truth is embodied and is Jesus. And if we're to have the marriage supper of the Lamb at the end of the ages, then we will be married to Jesus. We'll be married to the truth. We'll be married to mercy and justice and love. But we'll be married to the truth. I am the way and the truth and the life. That is really, really so simple and so critical. But that's why these teachings are so important. But they are hard, especially for people who come from a very secular or worldly background, as some of us may have come from, where you're used to doing what you want, when you want, how you want. And the church teachings are difficult to accept. You know, it's one thing to say I'm Catholic and take whatever comes with that as a benefit and be able to focus on that. But if you are not going to follow the rules, then you know, you're really not kidding anyone but yourself. And these teachings are especially vital today, because in our culture, we have gone so far. If you just compare the Lambeth Conference in 1930, the state of our culture and society then, you compare where it was in 1968, which was just about before no-fault marriage and abortion, and eliminating and trying to kick religion out of the public square altogether before that really got kicked off. And you compare that to today, you really look at it carefully, and people that are old geezers like me who lived during those times and have a comparison, you know that it's become warped and sick and depraved and deformed beyond anything you ever would have thought possible. In 2008, when Obama ran for president, he carefully made sure that people knew he was not for gay marriage. Well, he really was, but he knew that that was a rail he could not touch. You touch the third rail in a subway, and you're not going to be with us much longer. So he didn't want to do that. Transgender surgery. In 2010, let's just go there. If you said to someone that 10-year-old boys and girls should have the ability, independent of their parents and without their parents' knowledge, to be able to have transgender sexual reassignment procedures, hormones, and surgery, you would have said that is deranged. That's nuts. Maybe I need to take my child to a mental health counselor. Maybe I need to find out why they're having these ideas, because they're not normal. But now, it's not just that it is allowed or tolerated or is happening, but the society, the pressures are such that there is a demand that each one of us not just tolerate it, we have to say it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. Now, how do we get there? How do we get there? And the answer is, you don't get there overnight. You get there step by step, increment by increment. And, you can say you start with a little bit in the 1930 Lambeth Conference. Contraception will be permitted, but only under rare and restrained and unusual circumstances. And the Washington Post, of all people, said, yeah, right, that's not going to happen. They said it'll destroy, they didn't say it'll destroy the institution of marriage as an anthropological or civil thing. They said it'll destroy the holy institution of marriage. The holy institution of marriage. So they're recognizing that marriage is something that is ordained and created by God Himself. And that this will hurt it. It'll do horrible things to it. And all we've seen since then is the truth. There's one particular deacon that has a website, Deacon Delaney. I'll try to get it on the website address so you can look it up. But he wrote an incredible little essay on where we are now. He said that that the abortion bill, the choices of unconscionable sex reassignment, and all these things that started out in academia, and I think it was G.K. Chesterton said that there are some ideas so stupid and so crazy, only an intellectual in a college can accept them and believe them, and that's certainly true. But these ideas are going to serve as a renewed carnage of the human body and spirit, the human carnage of the body and spirit, and that the carnage that that we have gone through in World War I and World War II and so forth, that carnage is now advancing at an even more accelerated pace. 70 million babies have died since Roe v. Wade. That is umpteen times more than World War I, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, World War II, combined. And so, we're going to see as we study that ideas have consequences, and bad ideas have horrific consequences. They simply do. We're going to take a look at that. As we said before, the future of the human race, the future of the family, is at stake. Saint Lucia, one of the three children at Fatima, said that Pope John Paul II, Saint John Paul II, in Familiaris Consortio, said that the very future of the human race was going to run through the family. And what we're seeing is the destruction of what it means to be a man or a woman and what it means to have a family. And when if you will project, we humans, when we do something wrong, we like to say, well, this is the limit. We're going to draw a limit around it and say that these are the restrictions and you can't go past it. We always blow past it. So if you look at the Lambeth Conference and what it provided for, and you just do a direct line and plot all the points on the graph to where we are today. But in vitro fertilization, you take an egg and a sperm, or you take a lot of sperm and a lot of eggs, you fertilize them, and then you call out the ones that are most viable, the ones that meet your criteria, and then you develop those. Who here has read Great New World by Aldous Huxley? I think a lot of people have. Okay. Well, it's I think he wrote that in the 30s. He might have written it about the Lambeth Conference, but he wrote it. He talked about time in the future when through technology, there are no mothers and fathers. The term mother is an obscene, profane word. It's something that is akin to some of our most vile curse words today. It's just something you don't say. But human beings are gestated in tubes, and they're grown out in these tubes, and these tubes serve the same sort of function as the womb. It has its own set of nutrition, its own set of getting rid of waste during gestation, and then you can also select for the type of child you want. There are alphas. Alphas are the top people, the high IQ, high performing, smart people who are going to run everything for us. And there's a lot of people watching and think they're alphas, and they need to run everything for us. And then all the way down the bottom, you have epsilons. Epsilons are the grunts who do the physical labor. They do all the things that no one else wants to do. They're really just grunts, and they're the people that they really don't have much going for them. And there are no families. There are no families. You're raised in government-run nurseries and daycare centers. Starting to sound a little familiar? Okay? And so you don't have any teaching by the church other than what the government wants. There are no churches. And so what do you do to the human race? Today, our culture really, from everything we do, we want to mask the pain and discomfort of trying to live contrary to God's laws. And the pain and discomfort does come when you violate God's laws. There are consequences. If you abuse your body, if you commit adultery, if you commit fornication, if you do any one of a number of things that the Bible talks about, there are consequences. And one of the consequences is guilt. And no one likes to feel guilty. It's a bad feeling. Is it, God gave us that for a reason, so we would then turn around and repent. But people don't want that, so we take pills for everything. We legalize marijuana. We have Xanax, and I don't know how many different types of mood altering, tranquilizing, and mood elevation drugs are out there, but we have drugs to help you go to sleep. You take an Ambien to go to sleep. In the morning, you pop an Adderall to try to get yourself juiced up again and going for the day. During the day, you don't want to be triggered, you don't want to be uncomfortable, so maybe a little Elavil, maybe a little Valium or something, and you're like, hey, que pasa? I mean, we are narcotizing ourselves so that we don't understand and appreciate what is happening. And the last thing Satan wants any one of us to do is wake up, smell the coffee, and see the truth. Because that means he is out of luck with you. And so if your life is going really, really well sometimes, you need to ask, am I on the right track? Because Satan will do everything in his power to keep you comfortable and on the right track and prosperous and well and healthy. So you can continue to sin. Continue to sin and ignore God right until the time that your soul separates from the body and he claws that soul into hell with him. Bingo, mission accomplished for Satan. And so that's why we have these things. And they're not easy because each one of us, we are very stubborn jackasses. I know I am. I know that I have a very strong will and I want to do things my way. And I think my way is the right way. And I want what I want when I want it. But there's also a part of me that says, that was something maybe that worked for you when you were a teenager or a young adult, but how's it been working for you over the years since then? And I go, not so good. Well, you finally learn. Painful life experiences are good. But if I'm narcotized, I'll never maybe realize that. I'll never understand that. It's just, I'll give you an example. My brother committed suicide in 1985. And our family, of course, was devastated. But, we were at the viewing and I was helping make arrangements. My parents were complete mess. They couldn't do anything. And so, there were people that came up to me and said, and gave me an envelope with I said, what is this? And it was an envelope full of Valium pills. He said, here, you're probably going to need this. And I said, no, I don't need that. I'm supposed to be in grief. I'm supposed to hurt like the doggone devil. I'm supposed to be in pain. I'm not supposed to be okay with this. I'm not supposed to be mellow. I'm supposed to be hurt and in pain. Grief is a price we pay for love. And if you're just going to look at it like another day at the beach, then where are we then? Where are we? And I said, no thanks. And I gave it back. I don't want it. But there's a lot of people who just have gotten themselves to the point where they can't accept that. And so what we want to do in the theology of the body is look at man and woman, and we're going to look at man and woman in the context of the marriage sacrament we talked about, the sacrament that God ordained, and we're going to talk about what that means, not just for Adam and Eve, not just for us in the here and now, but what it means ultimately for the wedding supper of the Lamb. Because all of these things, everything that the church teaches, everything I'm going to try to share with you, as poorly as I might, is about one thing. It's about getting us ready for heaven, preparing us for eternal life. This time here on earth, whether you die at birth or you die as a centenarian, is really, really short. In the span of time, it's not even a smidgen. The Bible says we're like a puff of smoke that you see that the wind blows away, or we're like the morning dew on the flowers. By midday, it is gone. That quick. We will be standing before the Lord for judgment almost in the next moment. And the Bible says, in fact, you can't count on the next breath you draw. So everything we're talking about is to understand what God's plan for us is, why he is very insistent on these things, why the church goes to trouble to make sure that marriages are valid, not just from a legalistic point of view, but from the point of view of helping us understand that the unity and indissolubility of marriage, because there's going to be a unity and indissolubility of our living at the heart of the Trinity one day. We're not going to be living at the heart of the Trinity for just a short period of time, and then we're off on our own, going to wherever we want to go in the cosmos. No, we live at the heart of the Trinity forever. Forever. You know, the Trinity, you know, it's not like the three persons of the Trinity go on separate vacations from time to time or something. It's the Trinity. It's one essence. Now, we're not going to become that one essence, but we are going to partake of that energy of the essence. We're going to partake of that divine nature and live at the heart of the Trinity. How do we do that? You know, do we just live our lives any old way we want here, and then when we die, we'll say, well, God, I'm entitled to heaven, so you sort it out, and you plug me into the heart of the Trinity. That's not exactly how it's going to work. It's not how it works. So that's why we have the theology of the body. And we're going to look at, first of all, some things that stand in the way of our understanding, and then we're going to look at the things themselves. The three things that Pope John Paul II really emphasized in his Wednesday audiences was not just the spousal meaning of our bodies and our ultimate destiny, but he talked initially about his catechesis of the book of Genesis. And he said that by looking at the first three chapters of Genesis, we understand the original solitude of man and what that means and why God provided that. Then we were looking at the original unity, the unity between Adam and Eve. You know, this at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. What does that initial unity mean? And then lastly, we'll look at original nakedness, because as St. John Paul said, that reveals something incredible about the way in which a man and a woman looked at each other and related to each other. Because the Bible says in verse 25, this is Genesis 2:25, the man and woman were both naked, but not ashamed. Not ashamed. So we're going to look at what does that mean? What does shame mean in this biblical context? You know, we have a cultural understanding today of shame, what that means. But John Paul really uses tools of psychology, phenomenology, anthropology to look at these verses from the first three chapters of Genesis and bring out meaning and bring out things that were really astonishing to me. Because I don't know if you're like me or not. Hopefully you're not. Hopefully you're better. But I used to read, when I would do my Bible reading, first three chapters of Genesis, like, yep, I got it. It's the same old story. It's so familiar that your eyes just read right past it. And when you consider what John Paul II had to say about it, it's really astonishing. It blows your mind. And so we're going to look at that. Let's talk about something I mentioned earlier, and that is ideas have consequences, and bad ideas have really horrific consequences. Forever and ever, I think since the fall, probably, there's been an error in human thinking that goes by many different names, many different religions or philosophies over the many eons. But it's basically the error of Gnosticism and dualism. Gnosticism and dualism. Gnosticism is from the word gnosis, which means knowledge. Well, knowledge sounds like a good thing, right? If you're a Gnostic and you want to pursue and achieve and gain knowledge, that's a good thing. But Gnostics felt that along with looking at life and looking at human beings from a dualistic point of view, dualism meaning that, you know, we are body and soul, body and spirit, but the spirit is very, very good, but it is imprisoned in a material body. that exist in a bad material world. And that the way to liberation, the way to spiritual freedom and spiritual life and growth is by gnosis, by having knowledge of special things, of secret things, of special knowledge. And you can see, especially in Paul's letter to the Colossians, how he refers to that in the very first chapter. He calls out those that want to talk about the secret matters of the faith. There are no secret matters. Jesus, didn't tell the disciples, I'm going to share this with you because you guys are special, but don't tell anyone else. He told them, go out and preach and make disciples and baptize in my name. He told everything, and he left everything as a deposit of faith in the church for our salvation. And it's not secret and esoteric, and only things that brilliant minds, that are studying can finally wrap their minds around. It's just real simple. You are a sinner. You are a fallen human being. You have no chance of salvation except your faith and belief in Jesus Christ as the Son of Man. Jesus said, he who accepts that I am from the Father, that I am the Son of Man, and is baptized, you're saved. You're saved. You don't have to do a whole lot of heavy lifting, literally. And you don't have to, get a doctoral dissertation in something. You don't have to do any of that. You just have to say, my Lord and my God. Jesus is Christ. He's the Son of God, and he's my Redeemer. And I surrender to him. Real simple. Real simple. Now, theology exists to help us explain things and to avoid error, but the fundamentals of our faith are right there. Accepting the Apostles' Creed, getting baptized, and making that affirmation. Every time a child is baptized in our church, we as a congregation reaffirm our baptismal vows and reaffirm the fact that, yes, Jesus, we believe that for our salvation. We accept that, we believe that. And it's that simple. But Gnostics believe that there was secret special knowledge about the world, about the universe, about the body. And those that are in Freemasons, they are the epitome of that Gnostic philosophy, because there are degrees and levels that you have to work your way through before you finally get to, what the grand poobah is all about the whole thing. He's the one who's got the special knowledge, and you get to be, I forgot, was it like 33, something like that, Mason, then you are the top of the pyramid, the top of the heap.
It's like Seinfeld.
Yeah, so it's kind of insane. And the idea that our bodies are bad is wrong. And that's the whole point of the theology of the body. It is the body and only the body that can make visible what is invisible. And that is the divine spiritual life. The divine God himself. We are in his image. We can't see him at all. We can't see him. But it's as if he takes creation as a mirror and holds it up to himself, and the reflection is human beings, our image. Then that way we get an idea. What does Jesus say over and over again? Philip says, well, go ahead and show us the Father, it'll be enough for us. We'll finally have sealed the deal, Jesus, if you just show us the Father. And he said, have I been with you so long you don't get it? He who has seen me has seen the Father. Because what you see in me, in my body, and what I say in love, and what I teach, and how I'm obedient to the Father, obedient to the very cross. You have seen the heart, you've seen into the heart of the Trinity, you've seen the Father. And so each one of us is supposed to be an image of that. People, when they look at us, should be able to see something of the Trinity, something of God. I'm not saying, hey, I'm God's gift to humanity. No, it's not like that, but we image that, we reflect that. Now dualism turns all that upside down, inside out. It says our bodies are evil, our bodies are bad. And only by getting rid of them, escaping from them, do we achieve any type of special knowledge or peace or freedom. And that is absolutely false. Jesus did not become incarnate because Adam and Eve messed up, and so he had to go to plan B. Plan A was the Garden of Eden, paradise. You do everything I want you to do, and you adhere to this, and you'll live forever. You'll have those three qualities we talked about. You'll have immortality, you'll have that perfect infused knowledge, and you'll have that integrity of body, soul, and spirit anchored in the Lord. But you guys screwed up, so now we had to scramble up here in heaven to figure out what we're going to do. And so Plan B was, all right, we'll send the second person of the Trinity to be incarnate. With God, there are no Plan Bs. There's just Plan A. Plan A all along was for the second person of the Trinity to take on our nature, so we could partake of the Trinity's nature. That was the plan from the very beginning. And perhaps while God walked with Adam in the cool of the evening, he was preparing for that time when he would become incarnate, because I think we had what they call a theophany. There are places in the Old Testament where there's a human appearance of God, but it's not really the incarnate God. It's not the human God of the two natures, divine and human. Yes, ma'am?
Sorry, I'm a little confused. I thought the plan A was for Adam and Eve never sin and be always with God, and then it came the plan B to fix things.
Well, since God is outside of time and sees all things, he saw that Adam fallen. He saw Satan would rebel. God is never surprised by anything. It's not like God said, "Wow, I didn't see that coming." He's omnipotent, he's omniscient, and he is outside of time. Everything about God is above and beyond every category you can think of. If you recall from our class on Trinity, on the Trinity, there were 12 Aristotelian categories that we use to apply to the world we live in. God is above and beyond all of those categories. You can't put him in a category. You can't pigeonhole him. You can say what he's not and get an idea, get closer to his nature, but you really can't define him by any categories that we use. And so to answer your question, he saw that, foresaw that. And the Psalms, the Bible talks about that. In Psalm 40, here I am, send me. And it also says, a body thou hast prepared for me. From the very beginning, what does it say? It is written of me in the book at the very beginning, or written in the scroll at the very beginning. Here I am, send me. And a body thou hast prepared for me. So from the very beginning, from the very get-go, the idea was that God would become incarnate through the second person of the Trinity to share our human nature. He would become human so we could become like the divine. And so, that's a profound mystery. That's incredible to try to wrap your mind around that is really, really difficult. But we know it's true because Jesus said it, and Jesus was who he said he was. Not many people go through a scourging, a crucifixion, and everything he went through, and then appear before 500, appear before the 12 in the upper room, appear before all these other people, the people on the road to Emmaus, Mary Magdalene. That does not happen. People don't go through that and then get put in a tomb with a big heavy rock against it, and then get revived. And then they're good as new again, and they pop themselves right out, and they're ready to bebop on down the road. No.
So would that mean that God knows, because he also sees the future, he knows who is going to repent and be saved and who won't? So he would create people who he knows he won't get repentant and they won't. So that's, I understand
where you're going with that, and that is very, very difficult for us to wrap our heads around, because, we get into the area of predestination, that God has predestined people. We have free will. We make our choices. The fact that God foreknows something, like the Bible says, he knows my beginning, he knows my end. And before he formed me in the womb, he knew me. So there's that foreknowledge. but not predestination. If I wind up in hell, it's not because God said, I made it clear when I put that soul in that embryo, in that mother's body, that child Decker is going to hell. And no, he knows, he might know that I'm going to hell, but he doesn't ordain it or direct it. He has foreknowledge of it. And the problem, that we get into is our human minds are very limited. We don't like to think our human minds are limited. We like to think we're know-it-alls and we can figure anything out. And that's the next area we'll get to in a minute. But we think we can figure it out. And we think we can wrap our heads around things that are atemporal, that are eternal, that are on God's level. And like you said, my thoughts are not your thoughts. As far above as the sky is to the earth, that's how far above I am. And so what he's saying is, it's all well and good to meditate on a lot of these things, but don't get yourself all twisted up thinking that you're going to have the answers to these things. Remember, foreknowledge is not the same thing as predestination. Why do bad things happen to good people? Does God direct that? There's God's permissive will. God permits things to happen, but He doesn't ordain them to happen. Can He interrupt and stop those things from happening? Sometimes He does. Sometimes He doesn't. And that's the whole discussion Job had with God. He wanted God front and center right now, right here, to explain Himself and say, this doesn't make any sense. You got to explain to me, and so I can figure it out. Because, I want to understand what you're doing. I want to understand the provident, divine plan. And so, you've got 5 minutes to show up and explain yourself. And He does show up. He does show up. And He says, can you explain this? Can you explain that? I mean, things in this world that are incredible, Job could not explain. Things in this universe that Job could observe, he could not explain. He could not wrap his head around. And so the unspoken message is, you can't figure out this stuff. How are you going to figure out the eternal cosmic stuff in the spiritual world? You have no idea what I'm dealing with. But I do. And you have to trust me. I'm not, so what is the answer to what was happening to Job? There was no answer. Other than God is in charge, God's in control, He's a good God. And everything He does has a good end. God can only, always, and everywhere will what is good. He can never will something bad. He never has, never will something bad. But He sometimes permits things. There are many times we talked about sacrificial suffering and consecrating our suffering to Christ and identifying our suffering with His on the cross, because He takes that suffering and He makes it redemptive. God is not the Marquis de Sade. He's a loving God, but His love sees something beyond and above and infinitely greater than our love. And He works to get us there. And it's, quite frankly, if you're at a viewing or you're at an accident, you're a trooper, or you're experiencing any things in life that happen to all of us at one time or another, you don't understand. You're angry, and you feel lost. You feel like you just got a hell of a gut punch. You have to. We all do. And we try to understand it. We try to wrap our heads around it and make sense of it. And at the end of the day, we have to consecrate that suffering to God and trust that He will bring redemption. He'll bring growth. He'll bring something good out of it. God can take something evil and bring something good, bring something wonderful out of it. Look at Paul. Paul was the most hateful, dyed-in-the-wool Pharisee you could imagine. He had writs that he allowed him to go from place to place and do a citizen's arrest, if you will, of Christians and have them killed or imprisoned. And Paul had the rock concession at Stephen's stoning. Hey boys, I'll hold your cloak for you while you really cream that sucker and get rid of Stephen. He's bad news. He's saying all sorts of things. But, Stephen's demeanor during that whole stone was almost angelic. It was beatific. he saw something greater than what was happening to him. He saw Jesus standing at the right hand of God, and he saw clearly his where he was going, his future. He saw the same love. He loved the people who were stoning him. He prayed for the people that they were stoning. Now, when Paul was on his way to Damascus, to round up some more people and have them put to death, that image, everything that he had seen with Stephen stoned, was played and replayed over and over again in his mind. He had to. You think, that is really crazy how that guy was acting. See, he was so calm, he was so at peace, he was so loving, and he looked with love on every one of us. He looked with love on me, Paul. And I'm holding their coats and encouraging, throw harder, throw more accurately. That one just grazed them. Do better. I mean, that was Stephen's stoning. It wasn't a pretty thing. And then Paul had to, because he was a brilliant man who did the Old Testament, he had to be thinking of those suffering servant songs from the book of Isaiah. He had to be thinking of Isaiah 53. And he had to be thinking about that. And so when Jesus appeared to him and said, your conscience is pricking you. You know what you know. You know the truth, but you're fighting against it. Why? Why are you fighting? Why are you persecuting me? Why are you persecuting me? And so it was like, bam. Now, was Stephen stoning a good thing? No, it was a horrible thing. It was a horrible thing. Was Jesus' crucifixion a good thing? No, it was the most unjust, horrible act you can think. It was the most unjust judgment that any ruler, judge, whatever, could ever have exacted. But look what comes from it. Look what comes from it. And so, the idea of suffering, the idea of trying to understand predestination, foreknowledge, all these things are very hard. But God does not foreordain anyone to salvation or damnation. He doesn't. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
It's really hard to wrap your head around it. I'm sorry.
So, coming from a Baptist background, my pastor was actually Reformed. He explained to me that you can't come to God without His grace in the first place.
Can't come to God without what?
Without His grace leading you to seek Him in the first place. I believe the Catholic Church teaches the same thing, and it sounds just like predestination.
Again, we're talking about something that is a profound mystery, because we're trying to reconcile two things in our minds at the same time. And we're trying to reconcile these two things in our mind at the same time as fallen human beings who don't see things clearly and correctly. The one thing is we always think, I have to do something or say something for my salvation. And God says everything is a grace. Everything is by the grace of God. And God, through His prevenient grace, prevenient means things that God does to sort of set the table ahead of time to prepare us for making a decision based on our free will to accept something. When I say I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and my God and my personal Savior, that's a decision I am making with my own free will. But I'm not making it in a vacuum. The parameters or conditions in which I exercise my free will are things set by God. And we call those parameters or conditions that are set by God grace. God does little things. I can't tell you how many times God does so many things for us to prepare us that are incredible. But He is always careful never to interfere with our free will. He respects our free will as we are sovereign beings. We're not puppets. And for example, up until the time I was about 19, I was a dyed-in-the-wool atheist. Not an agnostic. I was a militant atheist. You might even say a devout atheist. But very, very consistent. Well, how did God change that? He changed it in a way that was really incredible. But he did nothing to interfere in my free will. It just at the same time, in that semester, three things came together and converged. I took a class on embryology, because I was pre-med at the time. And so I took a class on embryology, and I realized that trillions, every single second of gestation during that 9 months, trillions of chemical reactions, trillions of topographical transformations are happening that are incredible. If any one of those trillions or so goes awry, you don't get a human being. And it would astonish me that there ever would be or could be a human being. And it blew my mind to realize there's not just a human being that by chance finally got through that 9 months and is a perfect little healthy baby. But there are billions of us all around the planet. I mean, how does that happen? And my mom said, well, I didn't think about it. I didn't read books earlier while I was writing. I didn't say, well, this is the next step. Got to do this. I got to do that. And our bodies are running autopilot. Do you control the hormonal secretions? Do you control your blood pressure? Do you have anything that does all that keeps you where you are listening to me babble right now? No. It's all automatic. There are things that happen. So it astonished me. And I thought to myself, this is beyond random chance. And I took a biochemistry class, and we studied the so-called primordial soup, out of which, amino acids and proteins and blah, blah, blah. And I realized, for that to happen, it's like independently, you have a CD-ROM that you're going to play music on, that it just arose and developed and evolved spontaneously, that CD-ROM. And then independently and separately, there's a CD-ROM player. It just have to be perfect for that CD-ROM. And in the human cell, there's the DNA. And there's ribosomes. There's ribonucleic acid, or RNA, that's kind of like the reader. It reads that DNA and transcribes it into anticodons and into proteins. And amino acids into proteins and structure, and blood, and limbs, and bones. And so all these things develop independently. And for this body right now, if we sit here, there are at least, they tell us, 25,000 different enzymes working to keep me sitting here upright, trying to be coherent. And each one of those 25,000 enzymes and all that DNA, all just developed at random from that primordial soup. And there's a really great book that analyzes that whole theory. And it's bogus. It just doesn't happen. So I realized, there's got to be something going on. And if you have a perfect design, you have to have a perfect designer. You can't have it any other way. It will not happen. First of all, if you say, well, through permutations and combinations and random interactions over time, yeah, you can get there. You can. But the universe is 14 billion years old, which is what, 10 to the 8th or 10 to the 9th years? In order for there to be enough time involved to have all these permutations and combinations work out for something simple, not 25,000 enzymes, but something a lot simpler, it would take 10 to the 350,000th power. There'd have to be almost an infinite number of creations of 14 billion years for things to finally, do. The idea that you put a million monkeys banging away on a million typewriters, you get Shakespeare, that's not true. It's just not true. It's cute saying, and when you hear your professor at college say it, it sounds really clever and witty, but it's just not true. Mathematically and biologically and biochemically, it's not true. So I had that piece, and then I took a class on the philosophy of religion and morals from a teacher who I did at the time was Catholic. And, he really did a great job. We went through St. Thomas Aquinas and the Republic and all these things. And he gave me his assignment. I had to write my paper, disproving Aquinas' 5 proofs of the existence of God. And then there's a final piece that kind of fell into place where it's really kind of crazy, but I was coming out of the student union as a junior, and going down the stairs, and I saw this guy at the bottom of the stairs at a little card table, and he was what we call at Duke, because we're all very elitist at Duke. He was Italian, he was from Durham, and he had a sport jacket that looked like it once was a blanket that sat on a horse. It was one of these really cheesy, horrible-looking sport coats, and he looked really like a bumpkin, total bumpkin. And as I got downstairs, I was thinking, I'm going to have something really clever and biting to say to him and put him down. And as I got to him, he looked so, he's just so beatific. He looked so at peace and so calm. He just looked so nice. I didn't have the heart to say anything to him. He handed me one of those little green college, New Testaments with the Psalms and the Proverbs. So I took it, and I went back to my room, put my stuff down, and I opened up that Bible. Must be alert. But the first thing I opened up to was John chapter 16, verse 27. Did any of y'all know? I always had Baptists can quote you real quick, so maybe our Baptists here, but John chapter 16, verse 27 says, very simply, the Father himself loves you. That's it.
And then coming back to the predestination.
It's like click, 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 all the tumblers fell in place, and it's like the universe opened up for me.
Yeah, I want to make sure, Madeline, did you get your question answered?
Go ahead.
No, we'll get to it.
I always compare the predestination and free will thing to my looking at a 4-year-old playing in the street at 60 miles an hour. Now, I'm not God. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm human, so I'm pretty sure what's going to happen. Now, I can tell that kid to get out of the street, but he has a free will. I can't make him get out of the street. So I can send helpers. I can tell his mother to go, tell him to get out of the street. But the kid has free will, so he doesn't get out of the street. And I tell his father to try. The kid still doesn't obey because he has free will. Well, eventually, it happens. The kid gets run over by a car. That doesn't mean I predicted it or I caused it. It's just that I knew that this was going to happen to the best of a human can predict.
Well,
Now, this is why it's kind of related when we say only God can judge. Why did that little kid refuse to listen to me or his parents or anything else? Is he going to be damned to hell for this? No. Because only God knows what happened to this little kid that made him unable or unwilling to obey authority. And so, for me, that was the predestination. It's fine, God knows it's going to happen, but free will trumps everything.
And the child has to learn, has to go through challenges and lessons, and we're stubborn, like you were saying. I was so stubborn. Jesus kept calling me. I'm gonna say it just that way. And I thought I was listening, but he kept trying to tell me, no, that's the wrong way.
Well, we share something.
She said, until God calls you, but I think God is calling us every time, every day, every single time in our entire lives. He keeps calling us. So it is not one moment that He will call you and that's predestination. He will always be calling all of us, always trying to reach to us because He's a loving Father. So it will depend on us. So He will always be trying. So many times we have heard a song. So it's not one time that He will predict. It's just, it will be constantly because He wants you for Him, for love, for the rest of our existence.
I can only try and help a little by telling you what happened to me. I spent 40 years as a godless atheist. And does that mean I was not being called during the 40 years? Well, I wasn't open to it if I was. But it was here on these grounds where I felt drawn. And I drove out here one day and walked around in front of this church, and I remember the moment it happened. I'm standing there in front of that cross. When I made the choice, but I assure you, I could have walked away and said, I want to continue to live in this life. But I don't know, I can't answer that question, it's above our pay grade.
We each have different talents and capabilities, and one of the things that in the law that one of the concepts in the law by which we judge people, either we judge them civilly or criminally, is the concept of foreseeability. We have the gift, unlike any other creatures, of foreseeability. We can foresee things. We can see how the dominoes will fall. That is a watered-down version of God's perfect foreknowledge. But we have that gift of foreseeability. And so, but we all have it in different ways, in different categories. And some of us can foresee things very clearly. I can tell you, the older you get, the better you get at foreseeing things, because you've gone through so many experiences. How do you get wisdom? Through experience. How do you get through experience? Through things that are painful and bad. And so wisdom comes through painful, bad things. You foresee things. Foreknowledge on God's part is far more perfect. And so how do these people get judged? It's like Bob says, only God foreknows and knows our heart and knows us perfectly, and He's the best person to judge us, the kindest person and most just and merciful person to judge us.
I was just going to say, in regards to the predestination analogy that you had, I really liked that, but the one thing I will say is, from my understanding about the other side of the argument, is that they're saying more so than why, and I'm not asking this, but I'm just saying what I'm hearing from the other side, is like, what they're asking is more so than why did God then create that child who, you know what I mean? So it's not necessarily that scenario, but it's then bringing a scenario further step back. Well, why would you create somebody if you knew that, you know what I'm trying to say?
We're all like each other. We want an answer.
It's kind of like the Trinity.
And I'm not saying I get it or that I'm questioning it, but I'm just saying when I hear the argument, that's what they're saying is not necessarily that we don't have the foreknowledge, but just that, well, then why? Why to begin with?
Well, what I hear now and asking is, why do some people have the grace to be saved and other people do not have that grace to be saved? I think that's the question. But God's will is that all men be saved.
Rain falls on the just and the unjust. God's grace and God's love is infinitely poured out on everyone.
Remember, grace, the word we use for grace, it's a Greek word, kaios, but in kaios it means gift. That's important to keep in mind. A gift has to be accepted. I mean, a gift is offered, it's up to you whether you want to accept the gift or not.
Yep.
And the other thing we don't understand today, we think once a gift is ours, it's ours to do with as we please. If I gave you a gift, you could give it away, you could throw it away, you could keep it, you could do it. Back in biblical days, gifts had strings attached. Once you accepted the gift, you were obligated to the gift giver.
If I give my wife a beautiful, expensive engagement ring, that's a gift. A gift has three elements in the law. It has to have a donative intent on my mind to make a gift. It has to be delivered, and it has to be accepted. If you don't have all three of those, you don't have a gift. And so if I give her a gift as an engagement ring, and then if she accepts it, but then she says, well, I'm not going to get married to you, I'll keep the ring. Then the law says, no, you don't. You have to give it back. The law says we're going to make you give it back. And if you pawned it or sold or something, we're going to enter a judgment against you for the value of that ring. That's what the law says. Okay? And so that's like Dean said. You have to accept the gift, but you can't misuse the gift. And so if my wife misused the gift by saying, sucker, you're not married, she may have look back and thought many times, that's what I should have said. But no, she didn't say it. But then you have to give it back. Or in some cases, you abuse the gift and God takes it back. He takes it back. But His kairos, His love, His gift, His graces are poured out for everyone. The Bible says He does not want anyone to be condemned. He wants all to be saved. You know, His plan is for everyone to be saved. That's His intention. That's the plan. He didn't die for some, he died for everyone, including you horrible sinners. That's what, this is all about.
Well, let me, Alan, the question you asked is probably, I would say, the most difficult question for anyone to answer. We have free will, we're free to choose. God knows what we would ultimately choose. And if He knows that, with our free will, we're going to choose eternal damnation, eternal suffering in hell. Why did He create us? And why did He create that person in the first place? If He knew what would happen.
That's why I was tempted one time to join the Calvinist faith. Because everyone I knew who was Presbyterian and that Calvinist background, they were all part of the elect. And I thought, wow, what a great church. Everyone there is a part of the elect. They're all predestined to be elect.
Only
I've never
44,000.
a son who says, well, I know I'm damned, I know I'm condemned, it's been predestined, and but I like the fellowship suppers and casseroles, so I keep going. No, they're all elect. I'm really kind of.
That's why so many faiths have come up, the Seventh-day Adventists, for example, that those that are damned to hell cease to exist. I mean, God just annihilates the soul. But that's not what Jesus said, right? Jesus said that there is such a thing as eternal punishment.
And
so we can't go there. We can't say, well, God loves this person and He's not going to let them suffer for all eternity. I hang my hat on the words of Jesus. Jesus said that would happen.
He said the fires are never quenched and the worm is never exhausted from feeding. And so you will eternally be separated from the Lord.
But it's a critically important question that you asked. Why would God allow that? I don't know if the church doesn't have an answer for that, except that we have free will. We make that free choice. Nobody held a gun to your head and said, go to hell. You chose to do it. And why did God create you in the first place?
Sometimes later in life, you see why God did something or why something happened. But many times, maybe more often than not, we never do. We just never know. It's not until one of the things that I forgot who wrote this, some early church father, but we will be astonished, those of us in heaven, when the Lord opens up the Lamb's Book of Life and reads off to us what we've done to merit our salvation, that we'll be shocked by the things that are in there. We'll be thinking, well, it's because I gave all this money to the church on an occasion, and God thought that was really swell. That's not even in there. There might be something that really is significant, a kindness or something that you extended to someone who was desperate and had their gross sin that brought them to salvation, that kept them from doing something terrible. That's what, that was a biggie in God's book.
There's a true story that I remember someone sharing with me some years back about, there's a problem these days with suicide in high school. People, peer pressure, internet, and all this stuff, the bullying and so forth, and people are killing themselves. And a true story of a child who was contemplating suicide because they were being bullied, and a classmate just in passing said, oh, they're a bunch of jerks, don't worry about that. And he chose not to do it. He chose not to kill himself. It was like 30 years later at a class reunion that he told that guy, you saved my life.
Wow.
By that one simple, just don't worry about their jerks, their bullies, just ignore them. And I chose to do so. That one, the infinite value, that's why there's no such thing even as personal sin. The ripples of our action spread out to all eternity and never dying. You don't know where and when they're going to touch somebody.
Yes.
Interesting to kind of explain my own story. My mother really raised me in the Lutheran Church and gave me the ability to make a choice, and that always stuck with me. Throughout my life. But even when I went to college, of course, I didn't really practice my faith. And one day, this student who had a Bible study walked up to me and invited me to the Bible study. There was something so special about this guy. I mean, of course I said, no, I wasn't ready in college to go to Bible study, and that was just the farthest thing I was going to do. But I always thought about him because he reached out to me, and he was so kind and so solid. And when he said to me, was just, he reached out to me, and I said no. And another student that I knew who was, kind of a big, handsome kid, he took the bait, he went to the Bible study, and this kid became just such a special person from, studying God and accepting what was offered to him. I thought about that through my life. And then, of course, I never gravitated to the church, even as I was going through, although I did raise my kids Catholic, I think I'm a foundation, as I could, my wife was Catholic. But eventually the calling got so strong that I became Catholic, which was less than a year ago. And I think about that initial offering that I had from that one student, and it made all the sense in the world now that I'm in the right place, But I had my free will to say no, and I did say no until I was ready.
Well, Deacon tells us that the church doesn't have an answer for everything, and they admit it. Now that was kind of a surprise to me to hear, but when I thought about it, yeah, they don't have an answer to everything. That doesn't mean the church isn't valid. But we rely on the church to get as close to truth as we can. I can't explain the Trinity. No shame there, no one can. But the church tells me it exists. So I have faith in the church that it exists. The same with this predetermination. I can't fully explain why it's not right. It doesn't quite fit the pattern, but the church tells me it's a mistaken thinking. And I can believe that because I have belief and faith in the church. To me, it's just proof why the church is important. So I don't go running around trying to interpret the Bible on my own and just go way down the wrong road. And that's the big deal for the church. It keeps me centered. But I don't think any of us can positively prove that predetermination doesn't exist. We just have to have faith that God is more just than that.
Does anybody here an airplane pilot? Does anybody fly a plane?
Used to.
You used to, okay. If you have zero visibility because it's a rainy, cloudy day, what is the first rule of when you can't have IVF, visual flight, what's the first rule? The first rule.
Trust your instrument.
Trust your instruments.
Yeah.
Trust your. They say that's what happened to JFK Senior, right? Not the one now, his father, that one, whatever it was, Senior. Anyway, Robert F. Kennedy. No, John F. Kennedy Jr. Yes, I'm getting them all confused. He was getting that. He was taking his private plane. It was a foggy day. He looked out his window, couldn't see the horizon, he was flying by the seat of his pants, as they call it. The fluid in your inner ear gives you deceptive signals. You're sitting in a chair. I should be straight and level. You're not. Trust your instruments. Trust your instruments. That's always, I talk to many pilots and they say, yes, you trust your instruments. That's what the church gives us. In its doctrines and its teachings, it gives us a reliable set of instruments. It doesn't contain every answer to every question, but it'll get you safely through the place where you can't see out your window and all your senses are telling you to do otherwise.
You watch your instruments even when it's clear.
Well, yeah, but they say flying the plane on a clear day is almost as easy as driving a car. You just keep an eye on the horizon, look out the window, but it's those times when you can't see anything out the window. It's all gray. Trust your instruments. If you don't, it's dead.
Flying is three-dimensional though.
Yeah,
It's two-dimensional basically.
well, let's say a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Let's try to fly one just so you don't have to listen to me again. But the other heresy or bad idea that leads to bad consequences kind of arose in the 15th, 16th century. Francis Bacon, among many others, he's a philosopher, scientist. He wrote a book called, a treatise called Novum Organum, the New Scientific Method. And basically the thought was then that combined with their understanding or belief in atomistic materialism, that everything in the whole universe that you need to think about or consider is some form of matter, and all of that matter, as Newton tells us, obeys certain laws of mechanics. And if we consider simply collect enough data and organize enough data and have a powerful enough computer or whatever, we can control everything, we can predict things, we can understand everything, we can finally wrap our heads around the entire universe. And that did not, that thought process did not deny the existence of God, but it replaced or put that understanding or belief in God on a different level. Yeah, well, sure, there's God, but we need to conceive of the world, organize our daily events, organize our thoughts based on this precept, the precept that everything is knowledgeable. Knowledge is power, and if we simply do enough testing, collect enough data, and we apply the right law, we can predict and control and understand everything. And you know, I'm not saying that there is no God. I'm not saying I don't need God, but you know, it's just that, you know, we'll deal with God and we'll use Him or call upon Him Sundays during high mass or high Anglican service or whatever. But the rest of the week we're going to live differently. And that type of approach combined with dualism and Gnosticism is very, very potent. It gives us, as some of those writers said, that we are now empowered. We now have the ability to see beyond what others can see, and we are the masters of our fate. We're the captains of our soul. We are now at that point. And basically, we continue to search for and think the answer is in what Satan originally told Adam and Eve. You know, you will surely not die. You will be like us. We continue to think that we can be like God without God. That we can get there and achieve that without God. And the people of Francis Bacon's time, and the people of our time, people of our time would come out and say it out loud, but the people of Bacon's time do not deny the existence of God. They just said, well, we're taking Him out of our lives as the center and focus, and we're kind of putting Him over here. And we're just going to kind of put Him on the shelf. And if we need Him, we'll call upon Him, but we probably will not need Him. You know, we got to figure it out. And if you think that is really very naive and superficial thinking, well, that's what human beings are all about. Naive and superficial, stupid thinking. That's what we do, and we're really, really good at it. And we're good at rationalizing why we're really good at stupid thinking. And so when you combine those things, you have a problem. St. John Paul II basically undoes all that, and he opens up the mystery of us. He opens up the fact that we are not just people who ascended from apes. We didn't come out of the primordial ooze. We are unique, and we are alone in the universe. And we are alone with God because there's nothing like us. We stand at the crossroads, the metaphysical crossroads of the material and spiritual universe. We exist as spirit, as embodied spirits that have not just the ability of rationality, but we have the ability to create more life in the image and likeness of God. We understand through Genesis that there's not a single solitary thing in the cosmos that is like us, that is a suitable companion, a suitable helpmate. We are truly alone. And in a sense, our aloneness, our uniqueness, our solitude is a reflection, as with foreseeability with respect to God's foreknowledge. Our uniqueness is similar to the Trinity's uniqueness. The Trinity is above and beyond any category. It is unique, and it is alone in the universe. There is no other God. I alone, God would say, am God. There are no other gods before me. And we as human beings need to understand, we are unique in the universe. There's nothing like us in the entire universe. We are not just one life form that happens to exist on an in-class planet. We are unique. There's nothing like us in the universe. And I sometimes get a little bit amused by people getting so obsessed and preoccupied with aliens. Like they're something special, and what they're going to share with us is going to be something special and they're above and beyond us and they've evolved to a higher plane. No, we're it. We're the top dogs. There's nothing in the universe. I want you to think about that literally. There's nothing in the universe that exists for its own sake. We are the only things that exist for our own sake. And the entire universe was created and fine-tuned just to allow us to exist on this planet and to live and to grow and to share our faith and to die and be judged. You know, if you look at any of the physical constants, if there's anyone in here who's taken physics or any of the other disciplines, you know that the universe is fine-tuned to 1 to the 20th power. It is that fine-tuned. And that if it was off by a teeny bit, one way or another, we wouldn't be. There would never be matter. Everything would just be gaseous hydrogen. There would never be matter. Nothing would ever attract. We'd have no gravity. We'd have nothing. It would just be photons, I guess. Just be light streaming around aimlessly through the void. But that's not it. Everything was created and fine-tuned just for us. Just for us, so we could live here and share our faith in God and grow in holiness and spend eternity with God. That's what this is all about.
I know the church uses logic to answer questions that we can't fully understand. We have a 2,000-year history going back to the apostles who knew God, that God is all merciful, all loving, and all just.
That's right.
So if he's loving and merciful and just, predestination is incongruent with that.
That's right.
So with church logic, that has to be wrong.
We don't understand how God does things, but we can understand logically how he does not do things. And one of the things that St. Thomas Aquinas does in the Summa is he gives that an understanding of God by saying what he is not. And so what he says God is not is absolutely truthful, and you can bet on that. But St. Thomas Aquinas never says, in the following paragraph, I'm going to define exactly what God is. And you won't find that in there, because he couldn't do it. It's impossible. And so, we have that assurance. But not only are we alone in the universe, but we share an original unity with God. And the unity that Adam and Eve shared, bone in my bone, flesh in my flesh, is the corporeal analog, if you will, of the life of the Trinity. And we understand that we are alone with the alone. We refer to God as the alone, as above and beyond everything. There's nothing like him. The Bible says, I have no companion, I have no partner. There's no one like me, no equal, no one that shares things with me. I am alone as God, and you are man, alone as man. But together, we are created here to have a unity with me. One of the striking things about all of the Psalms, that's a theme repeated over and over again, especially Psalm 84, is we are created to be restless and to never rest until we rest in God. And Psalm 84 says, in language similar to the discussion or the language that God uses in the first chapter of Genesis at the end when it talks about God rested, we pine for the courts of God. Our whole being is created to seek and thirst for God. That's how we are. That's our orientation. He gave us, if he predestined or prefigured anything, it was our desire for him. But we can, through free will, go against that. We can go against that orientation. A lot of people say, well, if you're gay, you're born that way. That's not true. But you are born oriented toward God. Everyone is oriented toward God. And it doesn't seem that bad seed that's intrinsically evil from birth. In a lot of circumstances, the person may get there and make a choice to reject God, but we are created with orientation to thirst and pine for God. And so original solitude and original unity are things that Paul wants wants us to understand. He wants us to understand that we have that in our bodies. These are not Gnostic spiritual teachings or secret truths that we only share with the elect or the elite. These are things that we live and manifest and display in our bodies. And we do that, the most incredible way we do that is in the sacrament of marriage and in the unitive and procreative union of a man and a woman in holy matrimony. We mirror that type of unity and solitude and perfect love that the Trinity has. And one way of showing exactly what that means is in original nakedness. And the Bible says they were both naked, but they were without shame. And sometimes if you remember, little kids, little toddlers, 1, 2, or 3 years old, after they get out of the bathtub, they run down the hallway squealing, absolutely butt naked, and they're not even thinking about that. They're just totally natural. So they don't even think about that. They're not covering up or ashamed or that's just how they are. And what is shame? What does that mean when we talk about shame? What does that mean?
It's the knowledge of our nakedness, like our sinfulness. I think, when we recognize where we've gone awry and when we recognize our sin, we feel that nakedness, the shame, and you want to hide. You don't want others to know about it.
St. John Paul says that if you apply the tools of psychology and anthropology to this discussion, what you find is shame has various elements that are in play. One is fear. One is embarrassment. One is woundedness. One is afraid of how you're going to be looked at superficially. And St. John Paul says something really extraordinary that may shock you. He says, the problem with pornography is not that it shows too much. It shows too little. It doesn't show enough. All you see is a color, a texture, a form, a shape. You see an objective set of characteristics, but you don't see a person. When you're a teenage boy and you stumble upon a Playboy magazine and you open it up and look at it, are you thinking, I wonder what that person's feelings are. I wonder how she thinks about this. I wonder, what are her aspirations. I wonder, what she believes or what life experiences she would share. No, you're thinking hubba, hubba, hubba. You see an objective form that is there for your pleasure. It is there for your use. Shame is the reason why people, Eve might have felt shame, is that for the first time she saw that Adam was looking at her not as a person, but as something to be used, as something that might have usefulness or value or pleasure to him. And that led to them covering up. It's not that they were covering up the naughty bits, as it were. They were trying to cover up and protect themselves from being seen just as an object. Before, when Adam saw Eve and Eve saw Adam, they had that perfect understanding and knowledge of each other as a person, each other as a gift. And Adam was prepared to give himself to Eve, and he knew that Eve would accept and receive that gift. And in turn, he knew and accepted and trusted that Eve would return a gift to him. And that gift was sort of illustrated, made perfect in expression that this is that last bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. They were truly one. What God has put together that no man can take apart. They shared that unity, the same unity that the Trinity shares in a sense. and we always say in a sense, or similarly, but they had that perfect knowledge, and they had that feeling of intimacy, not pleasure, not seeing each other as objects, but as persons. If you look at the word intimacy and really break it down and say it slowly, you get a sense of what Adam and Eve thought about each other when they first beheld each other. Into me you see. That was the gift that God gave them, to be able to see into each other as a perfect person, as a gift from God, as a gift to each other. And that they understood that what they could share would be a unity. And more astonishing, this unity, they were told, would result in more beings like them. They were told, be fruitful and multiply, and have mastery or dominion over the earth. They had that perfect integrity of spirit and body, that perfect understanding of each other's gift. And when they realized that they had sinned, they realized that they become different. They were wounded in their nature. God took away the supernatural gifts that they had, and they were wounded. And in their woundedness, they were afraid. And their fear, they were embarrassed. And they not only were trying to hide from God, the alone that they were alone with, they were trying to hide from each other, as it were, by fashioning covering. Because they were afraid, they were fearful, they were ashamed, they realized that they had exchanged perfect knowledge and peace and love as persons for something objective that didn't exist. Satan promised something that was wonderful, but it was not objective. It was objective. It was like the apple that personified knowledge, the truth. The Satan was the original Gnostic. If you eat this apple, you'll have perfect knowledge. You'll know everything. You'll know everything. And we've been trying to recreate that, all along, and we never do. We never learn a lesson. But, what they exchanged was a Gnostic understanding or knowledge for the actual truth itself. The truth itself was a person. The truth walked with them in the Garden of Eden every day. The truth of God's love was right before them, beholding Eve, and right before her, beholding Adam. And they could make a perfect gift of their minds and bodies to each other, and knowing for a certainty and a peace that that gift would be received and treasured. There's a verse from. They say that the rabbi said all of Holy Scripture, all of the Old Testament, all of Scripture is holy, but the Song of Songs is the Holy of Holies, and it's a very graphic passage in the Old Testament. It can scandalize some people if they read it with earthly or carnal eyes, but it is a beautiful, beautiful book that portrays God's love for man, God's love for the Jewish people, God's love for His church. And Paul talks about this in the 5th chapter of Ephesians. He talks about God sacrificing Himself for us the way a man is supposed to sacrifice for the woman. And the woman in there is described as a garden enclosed, a fountain sealed. She is called, he refers to his bride as his sister. Not as a hookup, not as a chick, not as a piece of you-know-what, but as my sister. Keep looking at her in non-carnal eyes. When you look at your sister, you're looking at your sister in non-carnal eyes. And you should look at your wife that way. That's why Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, anyone who looks with lust on a woman has already committed adultery. And then St. John Paul says, you can look with lust on your wife. Because if you look at your wife or you look at your husband as an object, as something that you can use, something that will give you pleasure, something that is your meal ticket or whatever, then that's a very lustful, carnal thing. You're not seeing the person.
That brings us back to the contraceptives.
What's that?
That brings us back to the contraceptives.
That's right, that's
They're
right.
using those for careless pleasure.
And Andy, you said we still haven't learned, the best icon that shows we still to this day have not learned is, you know this logo? That's it. We still haven't learned.
And a little while ago, I would say that the church does teach that earth was for us and all other animals and plants are beneath us. I get that. But I don't think the church has definitively said there is no life of any other
The
planet.
church is not expressing an opinion on that.
No, that's science, the church doesn't teach on
So
science.
that's one of the things they.
There might be other human beings on other planets.
If a flying saucer landed in our parking lot, little green guys came running out, it wouldn't change my faith in the Catholic Church.
No,
That would not contradict anything the church teaches.
But think about that, every time you get an article about UFOs and little green men and everything, inevitably they always get around to the technology that we can learn and gain use of and manipulate. It's about using, we're all about using something. Everything for us is an object, and for each other, that should never be the case. That's the ultimate sin. That's the ultimate sin. I only have a few minutes left, but I want to, try to bring something around full circle. God says that that is to guard, is to keep until. You remember this expression? How many times you see the expression keep until? Keep about Adam. And then, and Eve is to be the helpmate. And if you think about that from an immature point of view, which is what I'm really good at, when I think about keep until, I think about Mr. Green Jeans on Captain Kangaroo with a little hoe, keeping his little garden and everything. And when I think of, Halloween, I think of Donna Reed with the dress and pearls and high heels doing the vacuuming, and, she's a little helpmate. And nothing could be further from the truth. If you look at the actual Hebrew language, when they say keep until, that's kind of an Elizabethan type of translation. What it really is a bod and shamar, guard and serve. Not keep until, guard and serve. It's the same language, same exact language that Moses used in the book of Numbers and the book of Exodus to talk about man's role, the Levite's role in guarding and serving in the temple, in the tabernacle at the time. They were to guard and serve the holy presence. The Ark of the Covenant had those three things in it. They were guard and serve them. And that's what Adam was supposed to guard and serve in the garden. And what he's supposed to guard and serve is Eve, because Eve would be possibly the vessel for the incarnation. But that plan would awry as God knew it would, and so he brought us through salvation history to the time of Christ's birth. But Adam is to be the bod and shamar. He's to guard and serve. And as Paul tells us in chapter 5 of Ephesians, he's supposed to lay down his life for his bride. He's supposed to die for his bride. And we as men are called upon in the same way. Some of the prehistoric diggings, you'll find mastodons in a pit where they tried to drive a mastodon into a pit so they could kill it. And what they also found there was human bones, because mastodon hunting is not without some risk. But they never found any female bones there, only male bones. The males were out there trying to get food so that people in the village would not die of starvation. And so I like to think of Adam is like this wall. He's a wall that guards and serves in the Garden of Eden. And the actual phrase for Eve is not helpmate, it's ezer kenegdo, which means a complementary or strong opposing force. Now, not that she's opposing Adam, but she's like the support that the supports. And so when they encountered Satan, Adam should have put Eve behind him and said, I got this, and be gone without doing that. But Satan was not just a little, cute little green garden snake. The expression is nakash, which is a bright, shining eminence, sort of the same language that is used in the book of Job to describe the Leviathan. This was a fearful appearance by this snake. And of course, we know that snake scales and skin can be shining in the sunlight, and that's why Moses used the word nakash. And he should have said, you get behind me, I've got this. I'm the guard, I'm the wall, I'm the one who's supposed to serve. And Eve should have been the support that says, you tell them to get lost, Adam, tell them to buzz off. That's what should have happened. But it was Eve who did that. Adam abdicated his role. Adam, through fear or through the desire to find out, he let Eve take the fall. He let Eve be the point man. That's just not right. That's just totally wrong. If you want to see a perfect example of what a real man looks like and what a real woman looks like, this is it. That's what a real man does. And that's what a real woman does. She, as torn apart as Mary must have been, she never said, get down off that cross, come home, come to me, let's go back and reopen the carpenter shop. This is nuts. It's going as far as it's going to go. I know you can jump down, hop on off that cross and come home. No, she was there as the mother of the church with a cup of chalice to receive the blood of her son. Because she knew that from his side would come the new creation, the church, as from Adam's side came Eve. And that is the unity, the love, and the lack of shamelessness, the lack of fear, the lack of any kind of embarrassment, the being alone and one. And so if you look at contraception, what you're looking at is you're destroying what it really means to be a man and a woman. Because if you take away those three things, man is to be a unit. He's to be united with another human being, and ultimately with God. That's how we learn it. We're to be procreative. He said, be fruitful. He didn't say, have sex. He said, be fruitful. With God, with us, everything's personal. Unlike everything else in the previous 6 days, he didn't say, let there be man. He didn't say, let there be man. He said, it's almost like God is sort of withdrawing, the Trinity withdrawing into itself and conferring and counseling among itself and what it knew and loved of its own nature, of its own essence, and the perfect knowledge of its own self, and deliberated and decided to create a male and female in the same image and likeness to share that life with the Trinity.
Hey, it's 10:56, just so you know.
Okay, 10:56. That's why in the Song of Songs again, and I really commend to your reading the Song of Songs. Read it very carefully, and even better. What I would say is, if you husbands and wives, read it to each other. Take turns, verse by verse, and read it. But one passage, let him. It starts out, I think, at the very beginning of the Song of Songs. Let him kiss me with kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. That sounds pretty hot. At the beginning of this, Bible. What is that doing in the Bible? But what happens at the very beginning in Genesis? God forms us himself. He doesn't say, let there be. He forms us himself out of the clay. And he breathes into us the kisses of his mouth. He breathes in that love, that pneuma, the spirit that makes us not just another living being, but a being in God's image and likeness, receiving his special spirit, his incredible, holy, divine spirit, for us. Not he didn't breathe into the nostrils of a hippopotamus, or he didn't form a giraffe out of the dirt of the earth. He formed us. A very, very intimate, very, very intimate creation. And the relation between man and woman has to be that intimate. When they have that unitive and procreative relationship, then they have that ability to be intimate. And they truly reach a point where into me you see. get an order online, Christopher West. If you go online, if you Google YouTube Christopher West Theology Body, you'll see umpty up hour 20-minute long videos. They are incredible. I urge you to watch those and buy his book, Theology of the Body. And if you really want to take it up to the next level, there's a book, The Glory of the Logos in the Flesh, which takes 900 pages to really bring out what that prologue from John's Gospel really means. Incredible, incredible.
And you know, we have the good news, Tim and Nikki being engaged. Nikki has asked that she get her ring blessed. So we will have when we start next Sunday, we'll start with a brief patrol service. So that there is a Leviticus patrol. It used to be married in the days of Mary and Joseph. Mary and Joseph were married. When it says they were betrothed in Jewish law of the first century, that means they were married. Today it doesn't mean that. Today betrothal is the blessing that you gave. But loving God and Father, you gave marriage, the original unity of man and woman, their complementarity, that great mystery that images the union between Christ and His church. We ask you to bless Tim and Nikki as they embark on becoming two in one flesh through the mystery of the sacrament of marriage. We ask you that you bless them abundantly. We ask that you bless that sign of the ring, the endless loop that shows that we are created for eternity. May you bring them one day to your heavenly banquet where we will celebrate the marriage supper of the Lamb. And we ask that you bless them, this ring, and all in their life. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.